get into that hottie class.
Sunday, The Michael J. Fox Show at 8 on Pearl. Despite Hong Kong's aging population, more and more couples have chosen to adopt or foster rather than give birth. And some adoptees even see their adoption as a blessing in disguise. The Pearl Report finds out why. Monday night at 8.
The thing that strikes you first about Tehran is that it defies expectation. It's a sprawling, modern city with lots of well-to-do, well-educated people. With the West and Iran locked in serious negotiations about a permanent deal to curb their nuclear program in exchange for relief from years of economic sanctions, we thought it was a perfect time to see what was going on there for ourselves.
What's your country?
America.
America?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Last December marked the 150th anniversary of the completion of the Capitol Dome. It's hard to imagine America without this crowning achievement, but when you hear the story of how it was created, it becomes hard to imagine that our dome exists at all.
This is the level that we go outside.
Wow. What a beautiful view.
Tonight, you're going to see it like you've never seen it before.
Garbage is the only crop in Katiura. 10 cents for a pound of plastic, 5 cents for a pound of cardboard. You'll be amazed at what else people are doing here with this trash. This is the recycled orchestra of Katiura. The violins are fashioned from oven trays. The saxophones and trumpets are made from old drain pipes. The keys were once coins and bottle caps.
I'm Steve Croft.
I'm Leslie Stahl.
I'm Morley Safer.
I'm Bob Simon.
I'm Scott Pelley. Those stories tonight on 60 Minutes.
For the past 35 years, the United States and Iran have been locked in a hostile relationship marked by diplomatic isolation, military threats, and deep mutual mistrust. Then last November, something happened. Amid rising tensions in the Middle East and the possibility of a military attack against Iran's nuclear facilities, the two sides stepped back and signed what amounted to a temporary truce. Iran agreed to freeze development of its nuclear capability, and in exchange, the U.S. and 5 world powers promised Iran some relief from economic sanctions. A permanent deal is still under negotiation. The primary catalyst was the election last year of Iranian President Hassan Rouhani, a reform-minded cleric who won a surprising and convincing victory by promising to improve the economy and end Iran's international isolation. Clearly something is going on in Tehran, and we wanted to see it firsthand. Last month, we were granted visas and packed our bags for an 8-day visit. The thing that strikes you most about Tehran is that it defies expectation. It's a sprawling, modern city with 12 million people, and most of them are offended by the perceived image of their country as a hostile, backward, dangerous place filled with terrorists. A conservative Islamic police state ruled by a religious theocracy. It's much more complicated than that. Iran is one of the wealthiest, best educated, most sophisticated countries in the Middle East, and most people here are eager to end their political and economic isolation if their government can work out a deal.
There is a lot of misinformation and disinformation about Iran.
Dr. Mohammad Nahavandian speaks from experience, having spent years in the United States getting a PhD in economics from George Washington University. Today, he's chief of staff to President Hassan Rouhani and considered by some to be the second most powerful person in the new government, one that would like America to forget about the rantings of former President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad and try a different approach that does not lead to military confrontation and war.
Now we are opening a new chapter, a chapter of building trust. Now that both sides have recognized that this cannot and should not continue, the best way is to coming to some agreement, and instead of imposing economic sanctions, try to utilize economic relations to overcome political disagreement.
In Iran, Nahavandian and his boss, President Rouhani, are both pragmatic moderates, less concerned about ideology than fixing the sick Iranian economy, which was the mandate from voters. To do it, Rouhani has to ease the economic sanctions that have been imposed by the U.S. and Europe as punishment for pursuing a nuclear program. The country's limited ability to export oil, import goods, and participate in the international banking system are largely responsible for high unemployment and an inflation rate of 30%. What about the sanctions? How difficult is the economy?
He hopes that it gets better while they are negotiating. And he wants things to get cheaper.
Cheaper. While the sanctions and their effects have imposed considerable pain and hardship on many Iranians, we saw no evidence that the economy was on the verge of collapse. The bazaars were filled with goods and people were shopping.
It's serious, but as we said, it hasn't really brought Iran to the knee.
Sayed Fateh and his son Abdullah are part of the business class that President Rouhani is trying to empower by privatizing state-owned industry, increasing competition, and opening up Iran to the world. They say the sanctions have done enough harm to get Iran to the bargaining table, but not enough to force the Iranians into a final deal they don't want to make. Do you think that Iran is willing to make concessions on its nuclear program?
It depends on the concessions, doesn't it? To stop it totally, I doubt it. But to reach some middle grounds, most probably.
The Fatehs gave up a comfortable expatriate lifestyle in the States more than a decade ago to return here and become pioneers in the Iranian internet. Their company, Pars Online, is now one of the country's largest service providers, but not as large as they would like it to be. How do you run an internet company and build an internet company when there are sanctions in place?
Everything is possible, but it's just a bit more expensive and a bit longer to bring everything.
You can get practically anything you want.
I'm expecting that the new Google Glass product that's coming out, hopefully, probably within the next month or two, you'll be able to find it in Iran.
In northern Tehran, we found shopping malls that would not be out of place on Rodeo Drive in Beverly Hills. They cater to the country's elite, many who made their fortunes through close ties to the government and even the clergy. We saw French perfume, designer clothes, and brand names like GoPro, Samsung, and Apple. Not far away was a showroom for BMWs and Porsches. And how does it get here?
Well, I'm sure they have ways to get things in through various borders, I presume.
It was clear Sayed had no interest in discussing the details. And when we asked him about internal opposition to the negotiations with the U.S., his son Abdullah suggested in Farsi that his father not respond. I mean, there are people in this country and people outside the country who really don't want to see this happen.
Well, no, why not? You do see some newspaper articles or talks, but whether or not that's a reality or not is a different issue.
During our time in Tehran, we were able to travel around without government supervision and free to speak with anyone who would talk to us about what was going on. It wasn't always easy to get answers.
There are people, many people speak English in Bazaar, but none of them. None of them talks about politics.
You don't want to talk about politics?
No, I don't want to talk about
Nobody wants to talk about politics.
Where are you from?
The United States. What do you think of President Rouhani?
He's better. He's better. That's it.
People in Tehran are very careful about what they say, which makes it difficult to figure out what's going on, even for Iranians. While there is wide popular support for President Rouhani's policies of moderation and engagement, there is also subterranean opposition from hardline rivals who have benefited from the status quo, including powerful forces that are either invisible or inaccessible to Westerners.
One of them is the Revolutionary Guard, Iran's elite military and security force that's charged with protecting the revolution from internal and external threats. But the Guard is more than that. It is a powerful political and economic force with tentacles in industries like construction, telecommunications, and banking.
They can be seen occasionally in uniform marching in patriotic parades, but the Guard operates mostly in secret, a shadowy brotherhood that, among other things, arms and trains Iran's proxy armies like Hezbollah in its fight against Israel. They do not give interviews to Western journalists, but they've been critical of Rouhani in the Iranian press. Other hardliners have held demonstrations that oppose any Iranian concessions in negotiations with the U.S. We asked Mohammad Nahavandian, the president's chief of staff, about it, and he answered very carefully.
The Revolutionary Guard is very much opposed to any kind of a deal, opposed even to the negotiations. True?
I think that generalization is not correct.
You know, my understanding is that this is not necessarily a smooth road for President Rouhani in terms of mustering support on all the things that he wanted to do when he ran for office.
Isn't that the definition of a democratic election?
That seems to be an acknowledgement that there are people here that are giving you a hard time.
The elected president is being accepted and supported by the supreme leader. So the whole system are supporting the elected president, and that is the case.
President Rouhani was elected to run the Iranian government, but it's his boss, the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, who actually runs the country and has the last word. He doesn't give interviews to Western journalists either, but he has no problem communicating with his followers through state-run media and the local mosques. If you want to know what's on the Ayatollah's mind, and we did, you can go to places like Shar Areh, a religiously conservative working-class suburb on the southern outskirts of Tehran. We were there during and after Friday prayers, and our presence caused quite a stir.
Where are you from?
We're from the United States.
What?
From America.
America.
What's your country?
America.
America. America?
Yes.
Oh my God.
What, you've never seen an American?
No.
No? No?
No.
We're journalists.
Word spread quickly, and within a few minutes we were surrounded by a crowd of people eager to share 3 decades worth of pent-up feelings about the United States, as told to them by the supreme leader.
The negotiating is good, but what is bad is that America is doing very bad things. After negotiating, Obama is telling the option of army is on the table. It is not a good thing.
What we want is not to impose anything to us. Nothing should be imposed by the U.S. to us. This lady also is saying that our supreme leader said to the government people that go and make peace and make that agreement. But I'm not very optimistic about this U.S. policies.
We listened to their now familiar grievances, beginning in 1953, when a U.S.-backed coup brought down a popular democratic government and replaced it with the dreaded Shah. All the way into the 1980s and the bloody 8-year war with Iraq, in which the U.S. favored Saddam Hussein.
Starting from foreign policy, you cannot find friends in Iran. But if you start from economics, from technological cooperation, from cultural relations, there can be some common ground.
The people in the United States also have grievances. Certainly the hostage crisis, supporting some groups like Hezbollah, that the U.S. considers to be terrorist groups. The refusal to acknowledge Israel's right for existence, or all issues of importance to American foreign policy.
For so long, those points of disagreement has been the focus of all the attention. Of course, there are some points of disagreement. You don't negotiate if you do not have disagreements. You negotiate to turn disagreements to agreements.
Right now, those disagreements are scattered across the desert hundreds of miles from Tehran, where for decades, Iranians have been aggressively developing a nuclear program they insist is for peaceful purposes, all the while acquiring the technology to enrich uranium to bomb-grade quality. There are people in the international community and scientists in the United States who say there would only be one reason why Iran would have all these centrifuges, and that would be to build a nuclear device.
It was not. For Iran, it was just another example of technological advancement. But when this was faced by military threats, people took it as an issue of national pride. Scientific accomplishments are a huge part of Iran's self-image. In spite of its isolation, it has launched a satellite and cloned a goat. Just a few days ago, the Ayatollah unveiled Iran's own copy of a U.S. surveillance drone. But for whatever it's worth, no one we talk to in Tehran believes the country wants to build a nuclear bomb. How do they feel about nuclear weapons?
There are no nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are forbidden.
They say it's all spelled out on the Ayatollah's website. But there's no shortage of skeptics, which include Israel, Saudi Arabia, and members of Congress who would like very much to scuttle any deal. This is a tricky negotiation. Yes. There's some political risk involved on both sides. You are exactly right on that. Because for all these long years of distance and not having a positive and constructive dialogue, there has been a lot of suspicion. So both sides, because of that suspicion, have a hard time convincing others. But that is the nature of diplomacy. The White House has said there's only a 50-50 chance that the negotiations will succeed. But whatever happens, this will be remembered as a moment of opportunity, lost or seized, the first one in a long time. And most people in Tehran seem ready to take the chance.
Number 1 was killed. Number 2 was murdered. Number 3 was hunted down. And they're coming for him next.
We are the last of our kind. I am number 4.
Tonight, I Am Number 4 on Pearl's Weekend Blockbuster.
Hi, Raindrop.
Wastewater, why are you here?
Let's hang out together.
Sorry, no way. We are collected by 2 separate systems. Wastewater in our rainwater system will pollute the rivers and harbor, causing a stink. You need to be treated before discharge.
Ah, somebody must have misconnected the pipes or poured wastewater into the rainwater system.
We have to fix that up. Never discharge wastewater into a rainwater system.
Rio, a city with an allure. Whose biggest annual tourist event serves to launder money.
They're the same tickets, just one agency charges more than twice the price of another.
Wednesday, Scam City, the last episode at 9:30 on Pearl. Disaster can strike when you least expect it. For 3 Wednesdays, starting June 4th at 9:30 on Pearl.
Over the last few months, the scaffolding came down from the Washington Monument, and last week, the obelisk reopened on the National Mall. The 555-foot tower was closed for repairs after being shaken in an earthquake in 2011. Well, soon, another symbol of the nation will be crawling with repair crews. Scaffolding will be rising on a seriously worn-out Capitol Dome. Last December marked the 150th anniversary of the dome's completion. It's hard to imagine America without this crowning achievement. But when you hear the story of how it was created, it becomes hard to imagine that our dome exists at all. We were given amazing access to the dome when we first reported this story last year, giving us a chance to see it as we've never seen it before. George Washington knew what he wanted, a building so grand that no one could ever move the Capitol from his city. He'd still find it on Jenkins Hill, where he laid the cornerstone. And he might admire the dome, which was built later, for what it overcame. Built by men who despised each other, topped by a Statue of Freedom cast by a slave. Through war and rivalry, the dome kept rising. And that's American character that runs deep below the skin.
This is when we go from that beautifully, richly decorated Capitol to the battleship gray industrial part of the Capitol building.
Stephen Ayers holds the title Architect of the Capitol. He takes care of the dome and everything below.
This is all original. It's all 150 years old.
Yes, it is.
All of this was designed by Ayers' predecessor, Thomas Walter, who proposed a dome no one had asked for. This is the Capitol that George Washington knew, and it's still the center of the Capitol building today. Walter won a competition to expand the House and Senate sides to hold all of the politicians coming in from the new states. But then, Walter thought the original dome looked too small, so he drew another.
He posted it on the wall in his office, and members of Congress would often come by and see that, and it just stuck immediately. Didn't even have a cost estimate, didn't know how they were going to construct it, how they were going to build it, how they were going to design it, yet it was so beautiful and so wonderful, everyone just knew immediately that they had to do it.
Walter drafted it after the great marble domes he'd seen in Europe, only to discover that the building couldn't support the weight. So he conjured an illusion. Everything, every column, every ornament is cast iron, painted to look like stone. The weight was cut in half.
Wow. This is from 1863, and you can see it signed by Thomas Eustace Walter.
His drawing in the archive reveals there are two domes, an inner dome with a ceiling painted with an apotheosis of George Washington ascending into heaven, and the outer dome ascending into the sky.
We are climbing atop this inner dome, the Apotheosis of Washington fresco by Constantino Bramidi.
That's right below us.
Yes.
We're on top of that now.
That's exactly right, and this is the level that we go outside.
This is the top.
It is the top.
Wow. What a beautiful view.
It's about 30 stories, and because D.C. outlawed skyscrapers back in 1910, you can see forever. For the record, the Washington Monument is nearly twice as tall.
So there's the National Mall.
You can see the Potomac River and Anacostia Rivers coming together.
Stephen, what did it mean to have this dome completed very near the end of the Civil War?
To me, it's a measure of our endurance, of our will to succeed, and our will to get it done, and our will to stay together as a country.
It took enormous will. In Congress, the first vote on the dome passed 71 to 70. A critic called it a great mistake. And then came the Civil War. Not the war you're expecting. This was the war between the greats, the brilliant architect versus the genius in charge of construction, Army Captain Montgomery Meigs.
He was incredibly honest, very efficient.
Bill Allen was the historian in the office of the architect who told us that despite Meigs' virtues, he was obsessed with winning fame.
And the way that he chose to do this was to put his name in every place that it occurred to him where it could go.
It went on the bricks of the D.C. aqueduct and on its stairs. M.C. Meigs even etched his name on copper plates and laid them between the stones of the Capitol.
In case 2,000–3,000 years later, the Capitol became an archaeological site. The archaeologists would discover these plates and know exactly who built the Capitol extension.
But the last straw came when Meigs claimed authorship of the dome, signing his name to Walter's drawings. The two men stopped talking and raised their pens like swords.
The letters are well worth reading. They're amazing.
We found them in the archive. Meigs, you're welcome to assume the authorship of the pyramids of Egypt. You have no right to the new dome. Walter, if I'm not the architect of the new dome, I'd like to know who is. I shall be glad never to receive another line from you. Meigs, I have the honor to inform you that your services are dispensed with.
He fired him.
He tried to. Walter, very calmly, writes back and says, I would like to remind you that my appointment is at the pleasure of the President of the United States.
The work slowed, but planning continued, including a debate about what to put on top.
They decided that they would have a statue that would speak of freedom.
Historian Lonnie Bunch researched the project for Congress.
And they went to a young American in Rome who was studying, and he came up with this idea to create a statue that had the look of America.
Describe her to me in your mind's eye.
Well, she is this beautiful woman who has some Native American features, is capped by this beautiful headdress as a reminder that this is a country that was different because it was built first and foremost around the issue of freedom.
And one of the men instrumental in casting the statue was a slave named Philip Reed.
Philip Reed was an enslaved man who was owned by someone who owned a foundry here in Washington. And that when the statue, initially plaster, came back to the United States, there was a concern about how do you take it apart? Philip was really one of the people who knew how to do this. And he came up with the idea of how to separate the model, how to then cast the model. He led the people who were making the cast of the bronze statue.
But freedom would be grounded in 1861 when the real Civil War began. Montgomery Meigs left to become Quartermaster General, supplying the Army with all that it needed for victory. But all the money for construction was diverted to the war.
One of my favorite stories that I'd love to tell my friends is that Lincoln ordered the dome to continue as a symbol that the nation would continue, and that story turns out to be false.
Yeah.
Matt Wisniewski, a historian for the House, told us it was the contractor, James Fowler Kirtland of New York, that resumed work without pay. They'd delivered 1.3 million pounds of cast iron and didn't want to see it rust away. Lincoln didn't mind.
He has the famous line that if the people see the Capitol going on, it will be a sign that we intend the Union shall go on.
This is the Rotunda. You're walking between statues of Washington and Jefferson. It's just off this room that you find the office of the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, who administers a lot of what he calls the campus.
You ever not look up? Do you ever take this for granted?
Never. Listen, for a guy who grew up mopping floors in my dad's bar, it's a pretty humbling experience.
You've come up in the world.
Just a little.
We went up in the world from the floor of George Washington's original Capitol to the heights of the Inner Dome.
Told you it'd be beautiful up here.
This is The Apotheosis of Washington by Constantino Brumidi.
I understand that somewhere in here the artist painted the face of the architect who designed the dome.
It's right over here.
Thomas Walter is the one in the long white beard.
Yes.
The scenes depict American hard work and ingenuity, and 180 feet below, 21st century citizens look up at Washington rising at the center of the city, laid down by him and urban planner Pierre L'Enfant.
Look how L'Enfant laid out this city with these radiating streets. Maryland and Pennsylvania, New Jersey and Delaware.
The Capitol right in the center.
Right in the middle.
And everything proceeds from here.
And you put the Capitol atop this hill, and that's how you create this iconic symbolism.
It was a symbol for the whole nation that the Union would endure. Now your job is to make the dome endure.
Up here, you can see what is hidden from a distance. The dome is falling apart.
Your guys bring in pieces into the office and say, hey, boss, here's what I found.
You can see the level of rust behind it that is just eating away at the cast iron.
Even worse, there are more than 1,300 serious cracks in the dome. Architect Stephen Ayers is starting a massive repair project. He showed us how they'll cover the dome with scaffolding for the next 2 years, replace the rusted parts, and stitch the cracks together with metal sutures. Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi helped Congress put up nearly $60 million for the work.
A lot of people think that you guys can't agree about anything. And yet, everybody came around to the idea of refurbishing the dome.
This Capitol belongs to the American people. It is this place for them to visit as the most identifiable symbol of democracy that there is.
On December 2nd, 1863, the dome was topped with the Statue of Freedom. And below, Congress had been working on freedom too. It had passed an Emancipation Act for the District of Columbia.
When Philip Reed helped cast the Statue of Freedom, he was a slave. By the time it's placed on top of the dome, he's a free man.
He is free. What happens to him is that he symbolizes so many of the enslaved African Americans who looked at that dome and saw it as a place of possibility, saw it as a place that said, here is the freedom that we deserve.
The titanic struggle that crowned the Capitol is largely forgotten now.
The House will be in order.
But next time you look on political gridlock and wonder whether anything can get done, remember how much can rise above the fractured politics of Washington.
The motion is adopted.
Tormented by destiny, the only way out is massacre. Coming at you from the streets. Sunday, X-Men Origins Wolverine on Pearl's weekend blockbuster.
Where is everyone?
Hello? Hello?
When there's no one around, the bad boys get badder.
Changing gear my left hand. How multitasking was that?
Oh, I've ruined my Ferrari.
Monday, Top Gear at 9:35 on Pearl.
佢俾我一個認可嘅資歷。
有毅進文憑，我可以繼續升學。
我揾到中意嘅工作，
喺工作上發揮所長。
毅進文憑課程接受報名啦！讀完毅進文憑，可以得到相當於香港中學文憑考試
5科第2級成績嘅資歷，包括中英文。
Surf the website for program details and online application. Yijin Diploma, finding my way forward.
Wing Shing Photo Supplies 40th Anniversary presents Wild Brazil, Tuesday night at 9:30 on Pearl Spectacular.
Ever heard of a town built on a garbage dump? We hadn't, until last year when we visited a community on the outskirts of Asunción, the capital of the tiny, impoverished South American country of Paraguay. It's called Catiura, and there's trash everywhere, in its streets, its rivers, in people's backyards. But we decided to take you to Katiura tonight, not because of the poverty or the filth, but because of the incredible imagination and ingenuity of the people who live there. Our story, as we first reported last November, is also a reminder that ultimately music will triumph everywhere and anywhere. Garbage is the only crop in Katiura, and the harvest lasts 12 months a year. It is Katiura's curse, its livelihood, and the only reason people live here. It provides hundreds of jobs to peasant farmers who are kicked off their plots by large landowners. They are the trash pickers. It is their profession. They sift through the stench 24 hours a day, scrounging for anything they can sell. 10 cents for a pound of plastic, 5 cents for a pound of cardboard. You'll be amazed at what else people are doing here with this trash. Just look and listen. This is the recycled orchestra of Katiura. The violins are fashioned from oven trays. The cello is from oil barrels. Even the strings are recycled. The saxophones and trumpets are made from old drain pipes. The keys were once coins and bottle caps. The strum skin used to be an X-ray plate. The guitar from dessert tins. The idea came from environmental technician Fabio Chavez. When he came to Katiura and saw the kids working and playing on this miserable hill, he came up with the idea of starting a music school to lift the kids' lives out of the trash. From the start, Fabio realized that even if he could raise the money, new instruments were out of the question. A factory-made violin would cost more than a house here and would almost certainly get stolen. But these fiddles aren't worth a dime. They are the handiwork of trash worker and carpenter Don Cola Gomez. 3 days a week, he goes to the dump to find the raw materials. Then in his tiny workshop at the edge of the dump, he goes to work. Fabio first asked him to make a violin, but this Stradivarius of South America had never seen one or heard one. Do you realize how unusual it is?
Yes, that's the way it is. When you need something, you need to do whatever it takes to survive.
He was soon making 3 violins a week, then cellos, and finally guitars, drums, and double basses, all out of trash. Take a look and listen to what Cola has created. 15-year-old Ada Rios has been playing for 4 years now. Today, she is the orchestra's first violinist. The first time you went and saw the orchestra and you see all these instruments with all these different colors, were you surprised when you learned that they were made from trash?
Yes, I was very surprised because I had thought that trash was useless. But thanks to the orchestra, I now realize that there are so many different things that can be done with this stuff.
Katiura didn't exist before Paraguay's capital, Asunción, started dumping its trash here. The town grew up around the garbage and became one of the poorest places in South America. 2,500 families live here now. There's hardly any electricity or plumbing. The drinking water is contaminated. Many of the children move from broken homes to crime and drugs. But Ada and her younger sister Noelia, who plays the cello, say that music has become their salvation, the centerpiece of their lives. And who do they have to thank for that? Their grandmother, Miriam. She is a garbage worker, collects bottles in the streets of Asunción, carries them back to Katiura to sell, 10 cents a pound. 3 years ago, Miriam saw a notice advertising free music lessons for children. That's how it all began. Why did you want them to learn music?
Because I always wanted to be a musician or play an instrument. Actually, I wanted to be a singer. Sometimes our dreams do come true. Maybe not in our lives, but through people that we love very much.
When I play the violin, I feel like I am somewhere else. I imagine that I'm alone in my own world and forget about everything else around me and feel transported to a beautiful place.
Can you describe that beautiful place?
Yes, I'm transported to a place that is completely different to where I am now. It has clear skies, open fields, and I see lots of green. It's clean with no trash. There is no contamination where we live. It's just me alone playing my violin.
Every Saturday, this drab schoolyard is transformed into a multicolored oasis of music. The kids flock here to learn and to play. Catayura is a long way from Juilliard, but these music students are just as dedicated as those prodigies in New York. And they don't get rained on like the kids here. Paraguay is in the tropics, and you're reminded of that all the time. But the band plays on. The veterans, 15-year-olds, are teaching the novices. Many are barely big enough to hold a violin. The music can't compete with the downpour, but there is refuge in a classroom. Fabio Chavez says that music teaches the kids respect and responsibility, not common commodities in the gang-ridden streets of Catayura.
These values are completely different to those of gangs. If these kids love being part of the orchestra, they're absolutely going to hate being part of a gang.
For the first time, the children are getting out of Catayura, performing around the country. And to Chavez, the Pied Piper of Paraguay, that's the most important thing. They're being seen, they're being heard.
These are children that were hidden. Nobody even knew they existed. We have put them on a stage, and now everybody looks at them and everybody knows they exist.
That's mainly because of a documentary that's being made about the orchestra called Landfill Harmonic. 18 months ago, the producers put their trailer up on YouTube. It went viral. The orchestra began getting bookings worldwide. It is such stuff as dreams are made of. The film, which follows their remarkable journey through concert halls in Europe and America, will only be released later this year. But already, instruments are being donated, and that's not all. The kids are getting help. Paraguay's most famous musician, Berta Rojas, flies down regularly from her home in Maryland to offer master classes. Remember Noelia, Ada's sister, the cellist? Berta is teaching her how to play the guitar.
This is a story that is filling my heart and my soul with so much inspiration, you know.
When you first heard them play, what went through your mind?
I couldn't believe that you could make music with trash. I couldn't believe it. And I thought, oh my God, this is the best thing that had happened in Paraguay in so many years.
Mari, and when you talk to the parents, you hear what you hear from poor people everywhere. They want their kids to have a better life than they've had. Jorge Rios is Ada and Noelia's father. If she becomes a professional musician, she'd probably be leaving town. How would you react to that?
Yes, the truth is, if you ask that question to every parent here, they would say they would leave this place if they could. I, of course, would like her to have a better life than the one I've had. And if she leaves, I hope she takes me with her.
What's hard to believe is that most of the parents and the people of Catayura had never heard the children play. That was about to change. A concert was finally scheduled. There were banners in the streets. The local radio station was ready to broadcast. The church was transformed into a concert hall. The children wore their finest. This was, after all, opening night. It could have been New York. All the students were on stage for the finale. Some of the musicians were performing after just one rehearsal. The parents were proud, of course, but just listen to the girl's grandma, Miriam.
I would say it's a blessing from God. People used to humiliate us and call us trash pickers. Today, they're more civilized. They call us the recyclers. So I feel that this is a reward from God, that our children who come from this place can play beautiful music in this way.
And here's a final note from the Recycled Orchestra of Catayura. Go on, send us your garbage. We'll send it back to you as music. In the last few months, the orchestra has been touring. In South America, it played before tens of thousands as an opener for the heavy metal group Metallica. Yes, you heard it right, Metallica. They're hoping to raise enough money to build a music school for their community on the edge of the dump.
I'm Scott Pelley. We'll be back next week with another edition of 60 Minutes.
With tips on crime prevention and much, much more. Stay with us now for another edition of RTHK's Police Report.
I want something that lasts, something that can keep up with me and keep me on my toes. Because every waking moment is a learning opportunity. I can choose to learn everything about something or something about everything. And I want to do all that at home.
The Open University of Hong Kong Special, open for learning, 9 a.m. Sunday on Pearl.
問你，我想轉呢個電話服務啊！
你揀電信服務嘅時候，有幾點要留意，唔好左耳入右耳出啊！你揀嘅服務一定要自己啱用，唔明白啲收費同服務條款要問清楚，唔好為咗收費優惠或者禮品輕易簽約啊！電信服務選擇多，不妨花啲時間比較下。總之要清楚晒啲合約內容先好簽約啊！
點解呢個飯煲可以煮出咁好味嘅飯呢？因為佢係煮飯專家啦。
獨特嘅黃金圖轉鍋，舞動沸騰技術令米粒好似喺鍋度跳舞咁，仲有200度蒸氣循環加熱，食過就知真係唔同㗎。
Panasonic IH 蒸氣磁形細試布，
千金難買好味道。
Panasonic. Where am I going? I'm leaving to Japan. I'm participating in a summer course held by Nikkei, studying at an established Japanese institution with a long history and good academic reputation. If you want to learn Japanese the right way, come join Nikkei's overseas summer course in Japan.
Hello, and welcome to Police Report. Traffic wardens were issued with a new uniform on the 2nd of March to better meet their operational needs. In speaking of the uniform, the most visible difference is the color of the shirt, which has changed from brown to beige, giving a more lively impression. Let's take a closer look.
Oh, 嗱，我有張簽名喺呢度等，但係咧，我依家行開攞啲嘢。又去邊度啊？冇，前一排咧，我同我女朋友咧喺團購嗰度訂嗰啲嘢嘛，依家上去攞啲。
嚇？又係嗰間啊？
好。